How many of these 15 public land deer hunting tactics are you using when every other hunter on the property is going home empty-handed? Public land is not private land with more people on it. It is a different game with different rules, and the hunters who consistently fill tags on public ground have figured out something the weekend crowd never will. The crowd hunts the easy spots, the obvious spots, the spots within 300 yards of the parking lot. The successful public land hunter does the opposite of everything the crowd does, and that is the entire blueprint. I have been hunting public land for 24 years across 6 states, from Mark Twain National Forest in southern Missouri to the Daniel Boone National Forest in eastern Kentucky to BLM ground in eastern Montana. I have hunted ground that gets thousands of hunters per season, and I have hunted ground that sees fewer than 10 boots all year. Both kinds hold mature bucks. The difference is how you position yourself relative to the pressure. The patterns hold everywhere. Stay until the end, because tactic number 15 is the one most public land hunters never consider, the one that compresses your stand recovery time from 2 weeks down to 4 days. And almost nobody is using it. The first tactic is walking 45 minutes past, where everyone else stops. The vast majority of public land pressure concentrates within 300 yards of any parking lot or trailhead. Walk a mile, roughly 20 minutes at a steady pace, and pressure drops dramatically. I'll walk a mile and a half, and you are often in terrain that sees fewer hunters all season than a private property sees in a single weekend. Mature bucks on public land survive by establishing core areas past that pressure boundary. The effort of the walk is the filter. It eliminates 90% of your competition before you even hang a stand, and it costs you nothing except sweat. The hunters who fill tags on public land share one trait above all others. They are willing to walk farther than the next guy. That is it. That is the whole secret behind half the success stories you have ever heard. The second tactic is hunting terrain nobody else wants. Swamps, marshes, steep drainages with no trail access, blowdown areas you can barely walk through, and long peninsulas of timber jutting from main blocks. These spots hold mature bucks specifically because nobody hunts them. The terrain that looks hardest on the topo map is the terrain that produces on public land. Pull up OnX or HuntStand on your phone. Those are the 2 main mapping apps for hunters. And look for the drainage that drops 200 feet in a quarter mile, about the height of a 20-story building over the length of a football field. Look for the swamp thumb nobody walks into. A swamp thumb is the narrow finger of higher ground that pokes into the wet stuff and creates a dry travel route through otherwise impassable terrain. Bucks love them. Hunters never find them. Look for the ridge that requires 45 minutes from the nearest road. Those spots hold the deer that survived every previous season. A 5.5-year-old buck on heavily pressured public ground did not get to that age by being predictable. He got to that age by living in the one spot every previous hunter wrote off as too miserable to bother with. The third tactic is hunting midweek. Weekend pressure from Friday through Sunday educates deer and pushes them tight into cover. By Tuesday and Wednesday, the pressure has lifted, the deer have relaxed, and daylight movement returns. The hunter who takes a Tuesday off work and goes deep on public ground is hunting a completely different deer population than the Saturday crowd. If you are retired or have flexible work hours, you have the single biggest advantage available in public land hunting, and you should use it without apology. Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. in November on public land in central Wisconsin can feel like you are the only hunter in 3 counties. And that is exactly the point. The deer notice the absence of pressure faster than the absence of food. Give them 3 or 4 days of zero hunting activity, and the daylight movement comes back almost immediately, especially in the pre-rut. The fourth tactic is using OnX to find the terrain nobody scouted. Pull up the topo layer on any public land unit and look for terrain that looks miserable on the map. Steep, wet, inaccessible, far from roads. Then look for the saddle, the ridge end, or the creek funnel inside that miserable terrain that would concentrate deer movement. A saddle is the low spot between 2 higher elevation points where deer naturally cross from one drainage to another. A ridge end is where a high point drops off into lower ground and forces deer to funnel around the nose of the ridge. That combination, hard to access terrain with a legitimate funnel inside it, is where mature public land bucks live. Most hunters scout the easy access areas and wonder why they only see does. The bucks are 800 yards away in the terrain that look too hard to bother with, about half a mile from where the average hunter quits walking, roughly the distance from the mailbox at the end of your driveway to the gas station 2 blocks down. Half a mile is the difference between an empty freezer and a full one on most public land units. The boundary is invisible on the map, but undeniable in the data. Cross it, and the whole game changes. The fifth tactic is setting up on escape routes before the season opens, not after. Identify the escape corridors that connect neighboring pressure zones to the interior of the public land. Creek bottoms, cedar strips, thick draws, saddles behind ridge lines. Hang your stand on these routes in August during the dog days of summer when nobody else is in the woods. Hunt them on opening morning before a single hunter has pushed anything. Every mature buck that gets bumped by weekend hunters during opening weekend funnels through these corridors. You are not reacting to pressure, you are positioned before it happens. The first time I did this on a piece of public ground in the Ozark National Forest in Arkansas, I had 3 different bucks come through my stand between 7 and 11 a.m. on opening morning, all of them moving with the urgency of deer that had just been pushed somewhere they did not want to leave. None of them came back through that corridor for the rest of the season. The opening morning push happens once. You either positioned yourself to capitalize on it, or you missed your single best window of the year. Everything in this video, plus 60 more field-tested techniques, is in the Buck Hunter's Bible. 90 pages of deer behavior, science, scent control, scouting methods, stand placement, and rut phase tactics with a quick reference card you can take to the stand. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. The 6th tactic is never hunting the same entry route twice in a row. Every time you walk to your stand, you deposit ground scent on the trail. A mature public land buck that crosses your trail twice in 5 days adjusts his movement pattern to avoid that corridor entirely. On public land where multiple hunters contaminate the same trails over the same week, this compounds fast. Alternate entry routes, even if it costs 20 extra minutes per set. A stand with 2 clean access options outperforms a stand with 1 contaminated route every single time, and the difference shows up in your encounter rate within the first 3 sites. The 7th tactic is the grid section method. Mentally divide any public land unit into equal sections on your mapping app. Hunt all of them, including the sections that look least promising. The mature bucks on public land live in exactly the sections that nobody hunts, because nobody hunts them. Pressure 0 is their attractor. A buddy of mine who guides part-time on public ground in central Wisconsin National Forest country told me he found his target buck in the only section of the unit he never would have hunted. Mature hardwoods with almost no obvious sign and no obvious reason to be there. The buck was there because nobody else looked. The overlooked section is the section worth hunting. The 8th tactic is hunting the private land boundary from the public side. Mature bucks on public land consistently use private land boundaries as security lines. They bed just inside the public ground near the private boundary, close enough to slip onto the unhunted private land if pressured, far enough to use the public land during daylight when pressure is light. A stand positioned 100 to 150 yards inside the public land boundary, about the length of 1.5 football fields, on the downwind side of known private ground. That's the wind direction that carries scent away from the deer rather than toward them, will produce encounters with deer that multiple private land hunters have been chasing all season without success. Those bucks are using the private land for safety and your public land stand for living. Position yourself accordingly. The 9th tactic is the high camera angle. Place your trail camera 15 to 20 feet up the tree, roughly the height of a basketball hoop, with another 6 feet on top, angled down at the trail intersection. Cameras placed at standard ground level scrape height get detected, scent checked, and avoided by mature bucks on pressured public ground. A National Deer Association field documentation has shown the same pattern across multiple study areas. A camera 18 feet in the air captures the same deer with 0 detection risk. No buck nose checks a stealth cam or a tacticam camera at 18 feet up a maple. As a bonus, the high placement also eliminates the camera theft problem that plagues public land. 2 problems solved with 1 ladder. I started running my tacticam cameras at 18 feet 3 seasons ago, after losing 2 units to theft on a Mark Twain National Forest piece. 0 theft since. 0 educated bucks since. The angle takes about a week to get used to, but the data is the same. Use a Reconix ladder strap or a tree mount that lets you angle the lens 30 to 40 degrees down. The frame should capture the trail intersection cleanly. If your frame is too tight, you miss deer at the edges. If too wide, and the IR flash washes out at distance. The 10th tactic is the two-man still hunt push. This is the lost art of public land hunting, and almost nobody runs it anymore. One hunter moves slowly and quietly through known bedding cover. The walker does not crash through. He moves at deer pace, calmly, deliberately, the way a doe would drift through her own bedroom. The second hunter positions at the most likely exit route on the downwind side of the bedding area. Post-rut bucks bedded in thick public land cover will not get up and move on their own during legal shooting light. A calm two-man push moves them without triggering full alarm. The push buck exits at a walk, not a sprint, and he walks right past the stander. Legal in every state I have hunted, rarely used, though consistently effective in the post-rut window when nothing else is producing. Pick the bedding area carefully. Use a wind that takes the walker's scent away from the stander. Move at deer pace, not human pace. Done right, this puts a bedded post-rut buck on his feet without him ever knowing why. The 11th tactic is the post-rain entry on public land. The 2 to 4 hours immediately after a rain stops on public land combine 4 advantages that almost never line up at the same time. Perfect silent entry because wet ground absorbs every footstep. Temporary scent reset because the rain washed scent molecules from the air. Actively moving deer because they are compensating for lost feeding time. And 0 other hunters because most of the weekend crowd stayed home when the forecast called for rain and has not bothered to come back. You have the entire public land unit to yourself under perfect conditions. This window is available multiple times every season, and almost nobody on public ground uses it. Drive to the trailhead the moment the rain stops. Every minute you wait, the window closes a little more. The 12th tactic is hunting the leeward slope trails instead of the ridgetop. Deer travel on the leeward downwind slope of ridges, not on the crest. The crest silhouettes them and disperses their scent in 2 directions at once, neither of which they can control. On public land, where every other hunter climbs to the ridgetop to see farther, the deer are 50 yards below the crest on the leeward slope, using a primary trail that nobody is hunting. Find that trail, confirm it with fresh sign, like rubs and tracks pointing in a consistent direction. And hang your stand 20 to 30 yards downhill on the downwind side. You are now hunting the most consistent travel corridor on that entire ridge system, and you are the only hunter on it. The 13th tactic is the one I almost did not include because it is more about discipline than technique. Tell nobody where you hunt. The spot that took you 3 years of midweek scouting to find will be hunted by 12 people the season after you share it on social media. Every cell camera photo you post needs to be checked for GPS metadata, identifiable terrain features, distinctive trees, anything that could let another hunter triangulate your location. The old guys at deer camp who consistently kill mature public land bucks kept their spots to themselves with near-religious discipline. Their sons post trail camera photos with GPS visible backgrounds and wonder why the spots went cold within 2 seasons. The single most field-proven public land tactic in history is silence. It was true in 1965, and it is still true today. The 14th tactic is locating interior staging areas with late summer velvet cameras. Late July and August is the only time of year when mature bucks are predictable enough on public land to pattern effectively. They are not pressured, they are not rutting, they are not chasing does, and they are feeding on consistent food sources in daylight. Most hunters wait until October to deploy cameras on public land, and they are already 3 months behind. Late summer is when the inventory work pays off. Place cameras on interior staging areas. And that's the thicker cover, 75 to 150 yards off any food source where deer pause and check the wind before stepping into the open in late July and run them through the end of August. The bucks you capture in velvet are the resident bucks on that public land unit. Their core area in August is within roughly 400 yards of where they will be in October. This is the public land buck inventory tool that costs nothing beyond boot time and a few cell camera plans. And almost nobody uses it because it requires summer effort that most hunters skip. The 15th tactic is the recovery window during the rut, and this is the one I have almost never heard another public land hunter mention. On private land, a stand you have blown by getting busted needs 7 to 14 days of recovery time before you can hunt it again. On public land during peak rut, if that recovery window compresses to 3 to 5 days. Why? Because the buck that identified your position may be 3 miles away the next morning, chasing a doe in a completely different drainage. The rut is the great equalizer on public land. It temporarily overrides the pressure-educated behavior that makes mature bucks nearly impossible to pattern the rest of the year. A stand blown on November 3rd can be hunted again on November 7th during peak rut and produce a mature buck encounter. And most public land hunters abandon their blown stands for the rest of the season because they assume private land rules apply. They do not. The correct move is to rest the stand for 3 to 5 days, watch the wind, and return on the right conditions. Look, I put the whole public land system, plus stand placement, scent control, scouting, and rut tactics into the Buck Hunter's Bible. 90 pages with a quick reference card for the stand, link in the description, QR code on screen. I killed a 4.5-year-old 9-point in the Daniel Boone National Forest doing exactly this 2 seasons ago. I had blown the stand on October 30th when a doe winded me at first light. She blew at me 3 times from 35 yards and crashed off through the timber. On private ground, I would have written that stand off until December at the earliest. On public ground during the rut, I knew the recovery clock was running on a different schedule. I rested it through November 1st. I went back on November 3rd with a north wind and killed the buck at 9:45 a.m. as he cruised the same trail I had been busted on 4 days earlier. Yanni had no memory of the previous encounter because his entire focus was on the does in the next drainage. The rut does this. It compresses memory, scrambles routine, and turns even the most pressured public land buck into something close to a private land buck for 10 days. November 5th through November 15th in most of the country. That 10-day window is when public land becomes survivable for the average hunter, and you should plan your season around it ruthlessly. The rut rewrote his pattern and gave me a second chance the deer never gives you on private ground. None of these 15 tactics require gear you do not already own. None of them require a lease, a guide, or a private property connection. All of them require a willingness to do what other public land hunters will not do. Walk farther, hunt midweek, avoid the easy spots. Use the rut window, rest the stand, tell nobody. The mature bucks on public ground are out there, and they are killable. Every year, someone you have never heard of kills a 160 class buck on a piece of national forest that thousands of other hunters wrote off as overhunted ground. He did not get lucky. He did the work nobody else was willing to do. He walked the extra mile in August when nobody else was out there scouting. He set the camera 18 feet up. He hunted the Leeward slope when everyone else hunted the ridge. He came back 4 days after blowing the stand instead of giving up. The work is the strategy. They are killable specifically because of the system that makes them seem impossible. Pressured deer establish patterns of avoidance, and patterns can be hunted just as reliably as patterns of approach. You just have to position yourself in the spaces between the pressure instead of inside the pressure itself. Pick 3 of these tactics and run them this season, not all 15. 3. Trying to install all 15 at once is the fastest way to overwhelm yourself, and quit before any of them have time to compound. 3 is the right number for 1 season. Pick the 3 that fit your specific public land unit, your specific schedule, and your specific tolerance for misery. The deer do not care about your gear budget. They care about pressure. Reduce the pressure on your spot, and the deer come back to it. That is the math. Pressure in equals deer out. Pressure out equals deer back. The mature ones come back last and slowest, but they come back if you let them. Walk past where everyone else stops. Hunt the Leeward slope trail. Use the rut recovery window when you blow a stand. Run those 3 for a single season and tell me your encounter rate on public ground does not double. Public land is the great equalizer in deer hunting. The hunter with a $300 setup and a willingness to walk 3 miles will outperform the hunter with $5,000 in gear who never leaves the trailhead. The hunter with the biggest budget does not win. The hunter with the most discipline does. That has always been true, and it will always be true. And the day you stop hunting public ground like it is bad private ground, and start hunting it like the different game it actually is, that is the day you start filling tags on the same boot leather everyone else is failing on. The hunters who consistently kill public land bucks are not better hunters than you are. They have just chosen to hunt it on the public land terms instead of trying to import private land thinking. That is the entire shift, and the moment you make it, everything else gets easier. See you out there. Pack a sandwich for the midweek sit. Walk the extra mile. Hunt the spots that look miserable. Trust the process. The deer are there. The system works on every public land unit in the country. You just have to be the hunter, willing to do what nobody else on that public land unit is willing to do.